Welcome to Excel Basics video number 13. Hey, in this video, we got to talk about the if function and the is functions. And we have 14 amazing examples of the if function and the is functions. Now, last video, we talked about a logical formula for the first time. We needed to compare your sales of $65,000 to the hurdle. That means if you sell $50,000 or more, you get a bonus of $500. But in our last video, we just did a logical formula that gave us true or false. And in this video, we need to see how to use this amazing function, the if function, to put one of two things in the cell. In your case, you're either going to get what's in B1 for a bonus, $500, or 0. So we'll see that example and many other examples, such as putting the text in balance or not in balance when we're checking whether debits equal credits in accounting. All right, let's first go over to the sheet, one of two things in the cell. And here's the thing. The if function seems hard, but it's absolutely not. The if function is for putting one of two things in a cell. For example, in every one of these cells, I want to put either true or false. Did the employee get the bonus? Down here, every one of these cells, I do not want true or false. I want either the text bonus or no bonus. Down here, every cell gets one of two things. They either get 0 because they didn't earn the bonus, or they get $750. That means each one of these cells gets one of two numbers, 0 or 750. Now, each one of these examples, we have some employees and sales. And the employee sales contract says if employee has sales of $20,000 or more, they get a bonus. So right here, I ask the question, is that sales greater than or equal to 20,000? False. So I'm putting a false. Right here in this cell, is that sales number greater than or equal to 20,000? True. So I'm putting a true right here. Down here, my goal down here is to put bonus or no bonus. For this cell right here, I'm going to run the same logical test. Is that number right there greater than or equal to 20,000? Because it comes out false, now I want to put the text no bonus. Down in this cell, I'm still trying to put one of these two text items, but when I run the logical test, is that number greater than or equal to 20,000? Since it comes out true, I want to put the text bonus. Down here, each one of these cells, I want either the number 0 or 750. So I run my logical test. Is that number right there greater than or equal to 20,000? True. So I put $750. Right in this cell, is that cell greater than or equal to $20,000? False. So I put a 0 in the cell. True or false? The text bonus or no bonus, the number 0 or 750. Now, we were easily able to figure out exactly what goes into each cell doing it manually. But when we get to see how the if function works, it's going to be so amazing and fast, especially if we have a data set with 50 employees. Now, let's look at three other examples before we try the if function. Now, for this data set right here, we have a slightly different contract. The employee contract says if you have sales of more than 30,000, then you earn a 5% bonus. Otherwise, you get a 1% bonus. So even if you don't make the hurdle, you get 1%. That means in each one of these cells, we're either putting 5% or 1%. So now, here's the cell. It gets one of those two numbers. I'm going to ask the question of that number right there. The logical test will be, is that number greater than 30,000? Since that comes out false, this cell gets 1%. This cell right here, we ask the question, is that number greater than 30,000. True, so we're going to put 5%. So each one of these gets 1% or 5%. Here's another great example. This is a phone data usage data set. Here's the total data in gigabytes that each phone owner used. And we need to either put the word under or over into each cell. Now here's the phone contract. Phone contract reads, if data is under 1 gigabyte per month, you don't have to pay an extra charge. Now we're not worried about the extra charge. All I want is either under or over. So here it is. True or false question. Is that number right there less than 1? False. So I'm putting over. Here's another cell. We're looking here and asking the question, is that number less than 1? True. So we're going to put under. Each one of these cells gets under or over. Down here, here's another great example. Here are account balances. And all we want to test is the number 0? If it's 0, I need to put no balance, just as it says right here. All of the cells that have something that's not equal to 0, I need to show nothing. So the cell will have to appear as an empty cell. So in this data set, we're using the if function to either put the text no balance or show nothing. 6 examples there where if we were required to do it manually, we would have no problem because it's easy to figure out which one of the two things goes into each cell. All right, before we go over to if one, I want to click on comparative operators and words. Now, here's the possible comparative operators. Is something equal? Is something greater than or equal to, less than or equal to, and not. Now, this is a weird one. You have to use a less than and a greater than symbol right next to each other. And we will not see this one in this class, but we'll see it in the following class. But we'll see all of these other ones. Now, the reason why I have this little grid with the comparative operator and the words is because when we use greater than or equal to, like we did last video in a logical formula, and like we will in this video in our if function for the if function's logical test, we might see it written like this: greater than or equal to, at least, no less than, X or more. Now, I went ahead and put an example. If the hurdle is exactly 2,000, here are examples for each one of the sets of words for that comparative operator. So if we're looking at greater than or equal to, and our hurdle is 2,000, it might be written like this: greater than or equal to 2,000, at least 2,000. Notice when it says at least, that means the smallest it can be is 2,000. No less than 2,000. Same thing there. The smallest it can be is 2,000. Or we might see it written as 2,000 or more. So you can use this as your guide as you're doing homework problems, test problems, quiz problems, or why not just keep it? And if you ever have trouble when you're building your templates for your own business solutions, you have a little guide. Now, this isn't all the possibilities, but these are definitely common phrases that we might see for each one of these comparative operators. All right, let's go over to the sheet if one and look at our first 2 examples. Example 1, hey, these are your sales you made for the company. And your contract reads, if employee has sales of $50,000 or more, you get a bonus. And the bonus amount will be $500. That is the hurdle. Now, another way to phrase this is, are your sales greater than or equal to 50,000? Now, let's remind ourselves of last video when we did a logical test. So in this cell, I'm not going to do if. I'm just going to do a regular logical formula. Equals, and I'm clicking on your sales, and then I'm going to use greater than or equal to. As we talked about last video, greater than or equal to symbol in math is a single symbol, but in Excel and Access and other computer programs, you have to put 2 characters. The equal sign always comes last. So notice also, the big side of the comparative operator is pointing towards your sales. So that has to be bigger than or equal to, and I'm going to click on the hurdle. Anytime we use a comparative operator in a formula, that formula can only come out true or false. So when I hit enter, it comes out true. Now, let's put either 0 or 500 into this cell. Equals, I'm going to type I, and I see the if right there, so I hit tab. The if, open parentheses, and there's 1, 2, 3 different logical tests. And the only hard part to the if is the logical test. And we already know how to create logical formulas, just like we did up here. That's all the logical test wants, is some logical test that comes out true or false. And then the rest of the if, value if true, that's just what to put in the cell if it comes out true. Value if false argument, that's just what you want to put in the cell if it comes out false. So you ready? Our logical test. Are your sales greater than or equal to the hurdle? And that's it, logical test. That's always the hardest part because the rest of it is just the two things, comma, value if true. Well, what do I want in the cell if it comes out true? $500. Comma to get to the next argument, value if false. That's what I want in the cell if the logical test comes out false. So I'm simply going to type a 0 because that number is not going to ever change. Close parentheses. And that's it. Control Enter. That is awesome. You got $500. Now, anytime we build a logical test like this, we want to test it. And notice we see explicitly up here, F2, that logical formula. Well, that little bit without the leading equal sign is what sits inside of the logical test for if. So we will be able to visually see what internally inside the if is getting and then dumping one of those two things. Now let's test it. I'm going to come up here. Oh, you got 49,000. When I Control Enter, well, of course, our logical formula comes out false, and the if properly dumps a 0 into the cell. Now I'm going to try exactly 50,000 because remember we got that equal sign in there. So 50,000, Control Enter. And that comes out true. And the if dumped the 500 into the cell. Now I'm going to click here, F2. Remember, in that logical test right there, that always comes out true or false. That's what it puts in this cell if it's true. That's what it puts in the cell if it comes out false. All right, hit Enter. I'm going to Control Z, Z, Z to leave that 65,000. Now, luckily, we followed Excel's golden rule here because the boss comes in and says, hey, you didn't get 500. You actually got $650. And so when I hit Enter, sure enough, the if function dumps 650 in instead of 500. All right, so that formula right there is dumping one of two numbers into the cell. Now let's come down here. And this is the same type of example. In fact, we saw both of these examples last video when we talked about logical formulas. But here it is again. Debits have to equal credits in accounting. And we have our balances at the bottom. But we know that sometimes we humans mess up. But Excel formulas are not going to make mistakes. So I'm going to build a logical formula here. Equal sign. I'm clicking on the debit. Then I'm going to use a second equal sign. That's a comparative operator, whereas that, of course, is telling Excel I am a formula. Now I'm going to click on the other side of the equal sign and click credits. So that comparative operator is asking, are these two things equivalent? And when I hit Enter, of course, it says true. Oh yeah. We learned last video that's why we have these logical formulas, because there's something going on here. Now, we can highlight, and we're suspicious about number formatting. We can either come up and use the drop-down for General, or we can use our increase decimal buttons, which I'm going to do. And sure enough, There's an extraneous 1. Now, we'd have to go back and look at the source documents, but it's highly unlikely that there was a tenth of a penny there. Now, I'm going to leave it like that. Let's come down here. And instead of putting true or false into a cell like a logical formula does, we want to put one of two text items or one of two text strings into the cell. We either want in balance or not in balance. All right, you ready? Equals if. I see if, so I hit tab. Logical test. Click on debits. Equal sign. Click on credits. There's our logical test. It comes out true or false. Now we just have to tell it what two things to put into the cell. Comma. The value if true. I definitely want in balance. Now, that will not work. Text in formulas without double quotes on both sides is not allowed. So we have to make sure and put this in double quotes, front and back. Now, those double quotes, don't type two single apostrophes. It has to be the double quote symbol. So there it is. That will be put into the cell if the logical test comes out true. Comma, in double quotes. Our value if false is going to be a different text string. Not in balance. In double quote. Close parentheses. So what do we have? A logical test. Comes out true or false. That's what it'll put in the cell if it's true. That's what it'll put in the cell if it's false. So when I hit enter, I better say not in balance. Now, as soon as we fix our error, backspace and hit enter, there we go. True and in balance. Now I'm going to Control Z. Here we put one of two numbers in the cell. Here we put one of two text strings into a cell. All right, let's go over to the if to sheet. And we have all those examples we talked about at the beginning of the video. This is example 3. And our contract reads, if an employee has sales of $20,000 or more, they get a bonus. Now, all I want to do is put true or false. So I type an equal sign, left arrow to get the sales for the particular employee. Greater than or equal to, the equal sign always comes second. And now I'm going to click on the hurdle and F4 to lock it. Control Enter. Double click and send it down. Go to the last cell and hit F2. That is a logical formula, putting one of two things, true or false, into each cell. Now, in our fourth example, we want to put the text bonus or no bonus into the cell based on our hurdle in our same contractual language here. So I'm going to use the if function. Equals if logical test. Same logical test. One cell to my left, the relative cell reference, greater than or equal to our hurdle, F4 to lock it. That's the logical test. Comma, value if true. I want the text bonus in double quotes. That's the value if true. Comma, value if false. No bonus in double quotes. Close parentheses. Control Enter. Double click and send it down. Go to the last cell and hit F2. There, we're putting one of two text items into the cell. Now, let's scroll down. And our next example, example 5. Here, we actually have the bonus amount. This is the same type of formula we did just a second ago in example number 1. But here, we're going to have to lock both of these amounts and copy the formula down. Sales amount has to be compared to our hurdle. And then we're putting either 0 or 750. Equals if logical test. I'm going to left arrow to get the sales. Are you greater than or equal to 20,000? F4 to lock it, comma. The value if true. I'm going to click on the cell with the bonus and F4 to lock it, because every cell needs to be looking at that 750. Comma to get to value if false. This isn't going to change, so I'm going to type 0. Close parentheses. Control Enter. Double click and send it down. it looks like Tawanda and Darius got 750, but the rest of us got 0. But our formula worked. We put one of two different numbers into each cell. Now I still need to go to the last cell and hit F2 to verify that all the cell references are working. And they are. Now let's go down and look at our next example. Example number 6. Now here's the contract for this employee situation. Contract reads, if the sales are more than 30,000, then you earn a 5% bonus. Otherwise, you get a 1% bonus. So in this column right here, each cell gets one of two numbers, either 5% or 1%. That should be 1% right there. So each cell gets 5% or 1%. Now, if we're eyeing this column, I am comparing each one of the numbers to the hurdle 30,000. But the numbers have to be greater than 30,000. So just eyeing this, it doesn't look like any one of these numbers is actually bigger than 30,000. All right, so let's create this formula. Equals if, I see the I, so I hit Tab. The logical test, I'm going to left arrow to get the sales for the employee for this row. Are you greater than? And now I'm going to click on the hurdle. There's no equal sign because if you get exactly 30,000, the contract says you do not get that 5%. You get only 1%. Now I need to lock this with the F4 key. There's our logical test. Comma. Value if true. I'm going to click on the bonus cell G25 and use the F4 key to lock it. Comma. Value if false. That's our 1%. I need to lock it as I go down, so I hit F4. Close parentheses. Control Enter. There's the 1%. Double click and send it down. 5%. Wait a second. That's 30,000, not more than 30,000. Why is the formula giving me 5%? Well, first off, I better go to the last cell and hit the F2 key. Well, wait a second. I see relative cell reference, and these are all locked. So the formula looks like it's working. Escape, right here, F2. Yeah, that looks like it's working. Well, of course, the formula got it right. Our eyeballs did not. Someone, it looks like, decreased the decimals. These are the same numbers we've been dealing for all the examples here. So I'm going to come up and increase the decimal 1, 2 times. And sure enough, this is correct, 29,999.99 cents. But this is exactly 1 penny more. It is more than 30,000. When we decreased the decimals, it just made it display as 30,000. The actual formula, of course, always sees the underlying number, regardless of what number formatting we apply. I'm going to hit Enter. So even if we were momentarily tricked by number formatting, our formula is working fine. It's putting one of two percentages into each cell. Now, in this example, we're just displaying the percentage. What we really need for each employee is the actual amount of commission earned. And the way that works is we take the 1% times their sales. Each one of these need to be multiplied times the cell. Now I'm going to come to any one of these cells and hit F2. That is the if function delivering one of two numbers to the actual cell. Same with this one, F2. It's the if function that looks big and it has multiple parts in it. But when Excel gets done evaluating this or calculating it, all the if function delivers is a single number. So escape down here. We want to first redo our if function, but then use that if function and multiply the result times the sales. Because each one of the employees wants to actually be paid the earned commission amount. So you ready? We'll do our if again. Equals if, left arrow, are you greater than the hurdle, F4, comma, if that's true, please deliver 0.05, F4, comma. Otherwise, please deliver 0.01, F4, close parentheses, Control Enter, and I'm going to double click and send it down. We don't have percentage number formatting here. So yes, the if function can deliver a number to the cell. But now let's come to the top, F2. The whole thing right here just pops out or delivers that number. So because if is delivering a number, we can totally come to the end and use multiplication and multiply it by the sales amount. And that will work. Control Enter. That's the amount that Rod earned. When I double click and send it down, go to the last cell and hit F2. All the cell references are working. And look at that. There's all of the commissions. All I know is I'm going to try much harder to surpass that hurdle of 30,000 so I can get a 5% bonus on whatever sales I make. Now we have seen the evaluate formula feature a few times, but I want to click in cell D35, make sure it's selected, and go up to formulas, over to formula auditing, evaluate formula, click. And I want to watch exactly how Excel calculates this. And I want to notice that the whole if will just deliver a single number that will allow it to then multiply times the sales. Now I'm going to either click evaluate or enter. So I'm going to hit enter, and it's looking in cell C35. Then, of course, it's going to look in F32. And because that whole expression is in the logical test, it will now check to see whether it's true or false. That's true. And notice the whole if function is underlined because now it chooses between whatever's in G32 and H32. What's in G32? 0.05. So when I hit enter, there it is. The if function is simply delivering a number to our formula. Now it looks in C35, enter. There's the two numbers that Excel will multiply. When I hit enter, that's the answer. I'm going to click close or escape. So F2, we saw that if function can deliver one of two numbers or one of two anythings to a larger formula. All right, let's scroll down. We have two more amazing examples. All right, example number 8. Here's our phone owners and their gigabytes of data that they've used. And we want in each one of these cells either the word under or over. Our contract says if your data is under 1 gigabyte per month, you don't pay any extra. Now, again, we're not going to calculate the amount that you have to pay if you're over. We just want under or over. And we're going to put our text that gets delivered to the cell, either over or under, into our assumption table over here, along with our hurdle, so that if we want to change the text later, we can. The decision whether or not to put over and under into the cell as compared to up here, we typed our bonus or no bonus in, comes down to your choice. Is bonus and no bonus ever going to change? Since we said no, F2, that's why we hard-coded it in. Down here, we're not exactly sure. We may want to change this later. So because it's a variable that can change, we put it into the cell. That's following Excel's golden rule. All right, you ready? Equals if, left arrow, I need to always look at the phone owner's total data and ask the question, are you less than? And there's the hurdle. Are you less than 1? I'm going to use the F4 key to lock it, comma. If it's less than 1, then we need the text under. Now I'm going to use the F4 key to lock that, comma. Otherwise, value if false, I'm going to put the word over. So I click in G39, hit F4, and that formula will work. Close parentheses, Control Enter. Double click and send it down. Go to the last cell in F2, and there it is. All of the cell references are working. So Eleanor and Darius were the only ones under the 1 gigabyte limit. Now here's the beauty of Excel's golden rule. Instead of over, I do not want it to say over. I want it to say extra charge. So I simply come up here. These are formula inputs. We put them in the cells. Our formula is referring to them with cell references. And of course, we labeled them at the top. But Excel's golden rule allows us to come over and simply change a formula input. And when I hit Enter, everything updates. Not only does Excel's golden rule allow us to change something quickly, but we see clearly what each one of the formula inputs are on the surface of the spreadsheet. So if there's ever an error later, the contract actually said 1.5 gigabytes. We can come back and without hunting through something that is invisible, those formulas are invisible, right? We have it right there. Hurdle, I simply change it to 1.5 and Enter. And then only Rod gets the extra charge. All right, now I'm going to Control Z to leave it as we started. Control Z, Z. Excel's golden rule, totally amazing, as is our if function. All right, here's our 9th example. And all we want to do here is if the customer has a 0 balance, we need to have the text no balance. Otherwise, these cells need to show nothing. So when we're done, there'll just be 2 cells that show no balance. The rest will show nothing. And we're going to learn something very important. We're going to learn how to get a formula to show nothing in the cell. All right, you ready? Equals if the logical test, I'm going to left arrow. And we're looking to see if this is 0, so I simply say, are you equal to 0? That 0 is never going to change, so we hard code it in. Comma, value if true. This no balance is never going to change either, so I simply type it in, and it's text. So I have to put double quotes. Now, comma, the value if false. Now we need to learn this secret trick about how to get a formula to show nothing. And the way you do it is you put double quote, double quote. There is nothing between those 2 double quotes. That is called a 0 length text string. Now, it's text because we put double quote, double quote. And because we put nothing, it'll just show nothing. Now, it's called 0 length text string because there are no characters there. So if you actually counted how many characters there are 0 characters. There's 0 length to this text string. Now, that's the technical reason why it's called a 0 length text string. But for us, anytime you need to show nothing in the cell, that's what you use. Double quote, double quote. Close parentheses. Control Enter. And I'm going to double click and send it down. Wow, look at that. I better come to the last cell and hit F2. The if function put this little double quote into the cell, and it told the formula escape to show nothing. Here, F2, the formula put no balance, the text no balance, into the cell. Now I'm going to click escape, and guess what? My intention was to follow Excel's golden rule because I might want to change no balance. So I need to edit this formula. I come to the top cell, F2, and I'm going to click inside the function. And as we've seen a few times in this class, it's awesome. The screen tips, you can click on any one of the screen tip arguments, and it highlights everything in that argument. So I'm going to click on value if true. I don't have to click delete. I simply come over and click on the cell with no balance, H46. And I need to lock it, so I hit the F4 key. Control Enter. Double click and send it down. If I want to change it, I could come over here and type all paid and Enter. Excel's golden rule comes to the rescue again. Now I'm going to Control Z and leave it as no balance. All right, so we've seen 9 examples of the if function. Now we want to go over to the sheet is functions and learn about a set of logical functions called is functions. Now there's a function called is number, is text, is blank, is error, is NA, a bunch of different is functions. And each one does something simple. Is number will deliver a true when it sees a number, false for anything else. Is text, it'll deliver a true when it sees text, false for everything else. Is blank delivers a true when it sees an empty cell, false for everything else. And there's some other ones also. Now here's our data set. For example, 10 to 12. We have date, invoice number, sales, and product. Now we talked about earlier in the class visual cues to tell us when someone has entered data incorrectly. So for example, dot, dot, Excel doesn't consider that a number. Down here, $2, not a number. But wait a second. I don't see anything wrong with that as a number, so I'm not quite sure what's going on. Now, this is a small data set. So we can eye each cell, click in each cell, and figure out what's going on. But on larger data sets, you don't want to do that. You want to somehow identify all of the records in our data set that contain numbers and the ones that don't contain numbers. Also, we might be interested in the cells that are actually empty because that means the data entry person forgot to enter them. So that's where our is number, is blank, which means is empty, and is text can come in handy. Let's start with is it a number? So equals is, and you can see there's a bunch of different is functions. NU, I see is number highlighted in blue, so I hit tab. For each one of the is functions, all you have to do is click a cell, and that's it. It will deliver a true when it sees a number, false for anything else. Close parentheses, Control Enter, double click and send it down. As we're looking through this, we can see, of course, it's delivering a false because that's not a number. True, true, true. False because that's not a number. True, true, true. False, that's not a number. False, false, that's not a number. But look at that. True, true. That means there's probably some style formatting, alignment to the left, which we should never use when we have numbers because it confuses us. We lose our visual cue. Here, that's a visual cue that it's not a number, and we can see why. $2. But over here, it was very helpful to have our formula tell us, no, that is a number. If we clicked on that cell, as we talked about in video number 8, probably someone, yes, indeed, someone messed up and used alignment on a number. Now, another important function is blank. We need to figure out which one of the rows is missing our entry for a sales number. So I want to check if the cell is empty. Equals is blank. Now, I wish they called it is empty, but they called it is blank. You can read the screen tip. It definitely checks whether this is an empty cell. Tab. I'm going to click on relative cell reference, close parentheses, Control Enter, double click and send it down. And so now I have an indicator for the rows where nothing was entered. True, true. Now, we can also check for text, because as we saw down here, that's text, but that's a number. So I want to clearly indicate which entries in the sales column are text. So is text. I see it highlighted in blue, so I hit tab. Click on the relative cell reference, close parentheses, Control Enter, double click and send it down. And so I can clearly see there's a text item there and also there. Now later in the class, a few videos ahead, we'll see how to do data analysis features like sort and filter. And that will help us gather up all the problem records to the top. But right now, we're just talking about these great functions, isNumber, isBlank, and isText, to give us a true or false and tell us whether we have a number, an empty cell, or some text. Now, you know, I created these 3 columns, and what did I forget? I forgot to go down to the bottom and F2. That looks good, tab, F2. That looks good, tab, F2. All right, let's go over. We have 2 more amazing examples. We got to go over to the sheet checkbook. Now, in this formula example, we're actually going to get to see both the if and an is function together in one formula. But let's first talk about a checkbook register. We enter records. And here on the 3rd, there was a check written for rent. We subtracted 500. Down here, we had a deposit, add 950. This record right here, we had a check, but no one entered the subtraction yet. We'll do that in just a second. So before we even worry about if and is and all of that kind of stuff, we actually need a formula to calculate the balance. Well, if we're thinking about the logic of how we would calculate a balance by hand, well, of course, right here, if we were doing it with pencil and paper in our checkbook, we'd have to look at the cell above for the actual previous balance, 5,000, and then we'd have to subtract 500, and we'd write it there. If we were doing this by hand, we'd write it or type it. So I'm going to type 4,500 and enter. In this cell, well, we still have to look at the previous balance, but now instead of subtracting, we have to add. So we would add to get, I think, 5,450. Now, we definitely don't want to do that by hand, but we're trying to create a formula. So we're noticing in this cell, I had to look at one cell above for the balance. In this cell, I had to look at one cell above for the balance. But now I'm going to delete these 2. What if we actually had a formula equals relative cell reference, always one cell above. So as I copy it down, it'll always look at the previous balance. And then I want to notice that this is a subtraction and this is an addition. But when we have a subtraction, this cell will be empty, which is like a 0. And when we have an addition, this cell will be empty, like it was a 0. So watch this. I'm always going to have to look either to one cell to the left or 2 cells to the left. So I'm going to subtract from the subtraction column. I'm always subtracting one cell to the left. And now I'm going to always add 2 cells to the left. Now, that'll work because, as we can see, adding 0 won't change it. And when I copy this down here, that subtraction cell right there, it'll be like subtracting 0. So this is the start of our balance formula. Control-Enter. And I'm going to copy it all the way down. I can't double-click because there's nothing to the left. And there we go. It totally is working. Now, what I'd like to do is turn all of these formulas off because I haven't entered anything in here. So for example, there's no date. Enter. That's the first thing we usually enter, right? And because there's no date enter, I just want to show nothing in the cell. But if, for example, in any one of these cells, there is a date entered, I want the formula to calculate. So this is an example where in every single cell, we either want F2, the formula, to run, or we want to show nothing. So escape. We're going to come back up to the top cell, F2. That right there is the formula to run. Or we want to show nothing. And as we saw in our last example, show nothing would be double quote, double quote. So we definitely know we have to use the if because we're putting one of 2 things into the cell. The only trick is, what is our logical test? Well, if we think about it, we could actually pick a number of different logical tests. But I'm simply going to say, is the cell with the date empty? If it's empty, like it is down here, then what do I want? I need to show nothing by using a double quote, double quote. So you ready? We're going to try this formula. After the equal sign, I see my if highlighted in blue, so I hit tab. Logical test. Well, it's not that thing. I'm just leaving that there. It'll push to the end as I create the earlier parts of the formula. But my logical test, I'm using ISB. I say is blank highlighted, so I hit tab. Now, I need to put value in. So I'm going to click on that many cells as a relative cell reference, the date column. Now I need to close parentheses, and I immediately want to type a comma. Now I'm going to click on logical test. That's beautiful. Is blank. Well, right there, it's false. That's not blank. False, false. None of those are blank. But down here, when I copy the formula down, I will get true from is blank. So the trick is, since the logical test is are you blank, I'm going to come right after the comma and write in value if true. That means if it's blank, I need to show nothing. Double quote, double quote. There's our zero length text string. Now, comma, and there's the value if false. So I'm going to click on each one of these arguments in the screen tip. I definitely want to run the formula when is blank comes out false. I definitely want to show nothing when is blank comes out true. And I definitely want to use is blank as my logical test. And that is an awesome checkbook formula. Actually, I've been using the same checkbook formula for over 2 decades on a number of checking accounts that I've been tracking. And it works great. Control Enter. I'm going to double click and send it down. Notice there's nothing to the left or to the right, but there's something all the way down, so it'll just keep going until it sees nothing. And look at that. Now I can finally properly enter check number 100 and backspace 35. Tab, tab, tab. This was for $55.25. When I hit Enter, of course, that balance formula there updates perfectly. But now I'm going to add a new record. Come over here. I'm going to type 10/5/2013. Now, I haven't hit Tab yet, and I want you to look over there. There's nothing. But as soon as I hit Tab, now the cell is no longer empty. So is blank says false and puts the formula into the cell. That is amazing. Deposit 5511. Pay tab, $150.45. And when I hit tab, the balance formula updates. So that is a great checkbook balance formula with if and is blank. Now, if you're curious, you can come over and look to the side. There are many different possible logical tests we can do. And over here are 2 other options. All right, our last example, we want to go over to the sales category sheet. And we have a sales table, date, product, country code, units, and sales. And up here it says if sales are greater than 250, so that's from this column right here, we need to categorize it as a large sale. Otherwise, we want to categorize it as a small sale. Company has used these category names for years and has no plans of changing the names. So that means we can hard code large and small in. And then it says make a cross-tabulated pivot table that shows country code in rows area and sales category in columns area. So this is a great example. We're going to use the if function to add one of 2 categories to categorize the sales. And then we're going to use that column in a pivot table as criteria along with our country code. All right, so you ready? Well, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come over to the side. And although large and small are not going to change, the hurdle might. So I'm going to type hurdle, Control Enter. Right-click to get my mini toolbar. I'm going to put red fill, white font. Down here, I'm going to put 250. Highlight, right-click, borders. All right, so now we're going to Ready? Equals if, left arrow, there are the sales, greater than 250 hurdle, and I'm going to hit the F4 key, comma. If it's greater, then we need to, in double quotes, type large. That's the value of true, comma. Value of false, in double quotes, small, in double quotes. So there's our two categories. Every cell is going to get either large or small. Close parentheses, Control Enter, and I'm glad there's a double click and send it down. Now I'm going to go to the last cell, Control down arrow. All right, so there's like 7,000 plus records. In the last cell, I hit F2. I'm verifying that the cell references are working, and they are. Control up arrow. Now I can build a pivot table. I'm going to click in a single cell. I have my field names at the top, records and rows, empty cells all the way around. Do not put the criteria for our calculation next to the data set. It's always got to be at least one column away. Single cell, insert, pivot table, or we're using our keyboard, Alt-N-V. It got the data set correct. I want to put it on this existing sheet location. I'm going to try something like A7. Click OK. If your pivot table field list is over there, I'm going to click and drag. We want country code down to rows. Wow, there's a lot of country codes. We have sales all over the world. And look at that. That's so beautiful. We created this column using the if function. And now I can drag sales category down to columns. And there it is, large and small. Now we can drag sales over to values. Be sure to get rid of row labels and column labels. Those are not helpful labels for our report. Pivot table tools design. Over to layout. Report layout, show in tabular or outline. I'm going to use tabular. Click inside the pivot table values area. Right-click number formatting to add number formatting to the sales field. I can tell it's the right dialog box because there's only a number tab. Now I'm going to click either currency or accounting. I'm going to leave 2 decimals. Click OK. And there, that is absolutely amazing. We created our cross-tabulated report, large and small, for each country. So we can see down here, for example, in Australia, we had a smaller amount in the small category as compared to the large. Down here in Finland, looks like the small sales outranked the large sales. All right, that was a pretty epic video about the if function. We saw how to use the if function to categorize sales and then use that extra helper column as criteria in a pivot table. Over here on checkbook, we saw how to use both if and is blank to create a checkbook formula. Over here on is function, we saw is number, is blank, and is text to figure out what type of data it is. Over here on if2, we saw a bunch of amazing examples of how to use the if function to put one of two things into a cell. And of course, we started it off with a basic example. With a bonus example, we either got one of two numbers, or down here we did debits equal credit, one of two text strings. And don't forget, we have this great comparative operator and word sheet over here. All right, if you like that video, be sure to click that thumbs up, leave a comment, and sub, because there's lots more videos to come from Excel is Fun. And in fact, our next video, Excel Basics, will be about another amazing function called VLOOKUP. All right, we'll see you next video.